Good evening, Jeopardy fans, and we are live here on hashtag Jeopardy Live Panel, presented by thejeopardyfan.com. Once again, and as always, I am Andy Saunders, and I will be moderating tonight's discussion here on hashtag Jeopardy Live Panel. And let's get right into the introductions here. We've got a little bit to talk about. We've got a couple of contestants from last week's games. On your screens right now with me, we've got Megan Durazo. Thanks for joining us, Megan.
Hi.
And we've also got one other contestant from last week, a champion from last week. Congratulations and welcome to hashtag Jeopardy Live Panel, Mark Ashton.
Hello.
So, It was an interesting week last week, but we'll get to that in just a second. The first question I usually ask here on hashtag Jeopardy Live Panel these days of my panelists, most Jeopardy players at some point start out as Jeopardy fans, and most Jeopardy fans kind of have an origin story, as it were, as to how they became Jeopardy fans in the first place. So Mark and Megan, how did you both become Jeopardy fans?
Mark, you want to go first?
Sure. Well, I don't, it had been a very long time since I watched Jeopardy regularly before I tried out. But when I was, so I'm like, for most of my adult life, I haven't really been watching much Jeopardy. But I did grow up watching it, and it was a thing every night after the local news. We'd watch Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, and it was sort of like we had to sit through Wheel of Fortune to get to the good stuff. We loved just watching Jeopardy and trying to yell out answers, and so that was always kind of part of my childhood. And as an adult, just didn't find that much time for it. But when I realized that there was an online test, that's where I was like, oh, I gotta try to get on this thing.
And my story is actually kind of in line with Mark's. I didn't watch it for a lot of my adulthood, and then when I started dating my husband, he's a huge fan, and so we started watching it every night at dinner. We still do. We have a hard time eating dinner without watching Jeopardy. And I've actually found it's the best strategy for being on Jeopardy, but I got third place. Maybe don't take my opinion on that, but the best way to do it is just to watch a lot of Jeopardy. So,
well,
I'm doing it for the years or so.
Personally, I would say that's probably a really good idea, though, to watch. The best way to prepare for Jeopardy is to watch Jeopardy. And actually, one thing I personally noticed on last week's online tests, there were a lot of, on each test, maybe there were 4 or 5 different clues about things that had come up already during that week's shows. So from that perspective, I thought it was really interesting, and just solidified that that piece of advice. The best way to prepare for Jeopardy is to watch Jeopardy. So just something that I noticed there, and so obviously the two of you guys got to sit around and wait for Friday's game. Now, obviously, you both had different experiences in getting to Friday's game. Megan, obviously, you were from the Los Angeles area, so you were you were brought in as a potential alternate with I believe, a 50-50 shot of playing. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
And obviously, Mark, you were there, and you were in a spot where going into that Friday game, you knew you'd be playing, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Sat through 4 tapings, anxious the whole way, wondering if I would get called. And then, once the 4th one was called and I wasn't in it, I knew I would be in the last taping.
So how is it watching that 4th game, knowing that you'd be playing against the winner? Was it any different from the first 3 then?
Well, for me, I found myself every time they did a taping, at the end of it, I would say, like, this is the dumbest thing imaginable. I would think, man, I hope I don't have to play against a champion. And then I caught myself thinking, oh yeah, you always have to play against the champion. And Lane was especially tough, so I was dreading it.
Yeah, it seemed like Lane was definitely improving as his run was going through. He had he started out slow, then got a little bit better Thursday, and then on Friday he had a particularly strong game, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he did. He used a couple of daily doubles to really good effect, and built up a pretty good lead going into final.
Now, Megan, I know you had a really, really strong performance in that entertainment category. Was that singled out as a possible strength for you?
I know that's a strength of mine. I'm really in touch with pop culture, so when I saw that, I thought, "Hold on, please, let me just take care of this one." But yeah, that was the only category that came up all day where I was like, "I'm really very confident in this." It's such a misfortune. I really didn't get much to my liking except for that one category. Yeah.
What other categories would you have liked to have seen?
I mean, I like literature. I don't particularly like all the literature is based on snakes. That made it a little bit tougher. I do well with English history, specifically like the Tudor period. Now that you're thinking of it, you're just asking me, I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. But yeah, there are some Jeopardy games where I feel like I'm at home, of course, I really nail it. And then you get up there under the bright lights, and it was just stuff I know nothing about.
Mm-hmm. Now, knowing that, would you have rather waited, or would you have rather, or were you fine with having gone against Mark and Lane?
I mean, hindsight's 2020, of course. I would rather have waited and like taken my chance on another game. But the other alternate and I could decide between the two of us, which would be better to just get it over with now and just play, or sit through a whole day of taping and then come back and sit through another whole day of taping. So, in one way, I'm glad it's done, but in another, of course, I'd like to have another shot and see if the cards fall a little differently in my favor.
Yeah, and I think Buzzy Cohen has a theory on that as well. I think his theory is certainly one of he'd rather or he certainly appreciated having the extra time in studio, and that's something that he thinks that he would, I think would recommend everyone or at least hope for as much studio time as possible just to get an idea as to what to expect. How did you both find the signaling device?
Impossible. Did you watch it? Could not get a hold on that button to save my life. Ugh.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out what my strategy was, what my timing should be. I felt like in the rehearsals I did fine. I was getting in on stuff that I wanted to get in on, and it wasn't bad at all. And then I kind of got in my head during the game, and I kept missing out on stuff I knew and getting beat to the punch. Or a few times I definitely locked myself out.
That's exactly how I feel, is that I just could not get a good rhythm with that button at all.
And when you're up there, it goes so fast. The light turns on and then it's off before you can even process it. The people who are buzzing in quick are so quick, and it really was really tough to like figure out what the right timing and rhythm was with that thing.
For sure.
So do you think Lane had figured that out by the third time he had gone up there?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was definitely more comfortable. And the toss-ups, he was beating us to the punch.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how much of that did you lose, as it were? Because you had obviously the Friday game, which I believe, if my notes are correct, because I am weird and I keep track of that stuff, I think it was December 6th. And then you had to come back December 12th to tape the game that aired yesterday. So how much of that did you lose, and what exactly are the effects of flying back and forth between Los Angeles and Chicago twice with trips on consecutive weeks like that?
Sure. The flying wasn't a big deal. I had plenty of time to recover. but it definitely, I think that it took the edge off a little bit to have that long break. I wasn't as like, I don't know, excited. It was more like relaxed, and maybe relaxed in an unhelpful way. And I definitely lost a lot of the timing. They didn't give me a lot of time up there in the rehearsal, um, because they wanted the new contestants obviously to get a shot at getting good with the buzzer. And if you know, in yesterday's game, you probably saw Zach was just so fast. He was on top of everything. And there were a bunch of times where you could see me clicking away at the button in frustration, trying to get in on stuff that I knew, but I just couldn't buzz in on. So yeah, it definitely, I think it's probably in some ways beneficial to do them more back to back, but I have heard from people it's also extremely exhausting. So I had the advantage of being rested.
So I mean that's an interesting way of putting it for sure. That you know, there's certainly it's very tiring to go, you know, consecutive games like that, or you know, and then. But again, on the other hand, you know, you're flying back, and you're, you know, you may have lost a lot of your previous timing. So I think it's probably 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. That, you know, there's some advantages and some disadvantages to either side. Now, regarding your respective contestant interviews with Alex, did he talk about what you thought he'd talk about, or did he go off script?
For me, he definitely did. I thought the New Yorker thing was going to come up. That's the only interesting thing about me.
That's not true, first of all. But I also had just an excruciatingly hard time filling out the 5 facts. Like, I just was like, what's interesting about me? Nothing. So yeah, we talked about the Dodgers, which, I mean, go Dodgers. That's a fun time that I had, but I don't know that in retrospect it's the most interesting thing about me. I'm sure I could have come up with something else, but oh well.
Now, another thing I was thinking about, noticing the contestants for this week. I've got a couple of thoughts about that. My first one, specifically, there is one of, I believe, tomorrow's contestants. His name is Peter, and Mark, you're both you and Peter are billed as from the same town, and both working in software. So,
Yep.
Did you guys know each other? Happen to know each other in the, you know, beforehand?
The fix is
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Megan. What was that?
the fix is in.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, I mean, Elmhurst, Illinois is known as the trivia capital of the world, so it's not that surprising. No, it's not. So when I went back out to tape the second episode, Monday night, I went out with my support crew, my family, to dinner. And as we were leaving dinner, we walked past this guy, and he's wearing a University of Illinois t-shirt, which is where I went to school and where my wife went to school. And I said, hey, you know, University of Illinois. And we got to talking. And he said, you're not from Elmhurst, are you? And I said, yeah, I'm from Elmhurst. And he was from Elmhurst. And it was Pete. And we didn't mention, neither of us mentioned why we were out there. So the next morning when I got on the shuttle to go to Jeopardy, I was kind of looking for him, you know, kind of thinking like, maybe, who knows, maybe that's why he's here. And sure enough, right before we headed to the studio, Pete came on board. So we didn't know each other beforehand. It's just a really weird, crazy coincidence. It's also really weird and crazy that we both happened to go to the same restaurant the night before the taping. And I see Pete regularly now. We go out to lunch sometimes, and you know, Elmhurst is not a particularly big suburb. I think we have like 40,000 people or something like that. So we're, I even bumped into him in the grocery store the week after we came back, believe it or not.
Nice.
Yeah.
And the other part about this coming week's Green Room, actually, from tonight's episode, Paris Themin was on. And so I think, did Did his previous acting experience come up at all in the green room?
It did. Maggie Speak, who is the producer, turned him in. Basically, she announced it to the entire room that Paris had been Mike TV on the original Willy Wonka movie. And he was very gracious about it. I can imagine that would be something that he's had a long and eventful life since that role, and I imagine it could get a little bit annoying when that's all anybody wants to talk about. But he was very, very nice about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for the sake, I wouldn't. I would say it's not too much of a spoiler that did not come up tonight in his interview. Alex did not bring it up. So, do you happen to know if that fact was on his card, or you're not sure?
I'm not sure, yeah, but I thought the one that Alex picked was real nice about all the backpacking he does. I thought that was a good personality piece.
Yeah. I thought so too. It just seemed that there were a lot of people in spots on the internet who seemed disappointed that his role as Mike TV was not brought up tonight. But
I like to think that maybe Alex anticipated that might be not his favorite thing to talk about, and was showing a little bit of empathy there.
Makes sense. So, did either of you happen to have a watch party for for any of your episodes?
Well, I don't know about you, Mark, but I was going to, and then things got switched around a bit there at the end. So I actually was hosting our library's trivia program on Friday, so I was watching them do trivia instead of watching myself.
Yeah, I fortunately it's kind of strange here in Chicago. Jeopardy airs real early at 3:30, so we watched it at work, and then I also had a watch party for family and friends over the weekend. But yeah, we did have to scramble because our airing got moved up 2 weeks. We had to scramble to make a lot of changes to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. Now, how much notice? When did you end up finding out?
Late February, right?
Well, I'm trying to remember. One of the other contestants actually emailed me, and mentioned that she had heard that things were being moved up. So I emailed one of the contestant coordinators, and they confirmed it. I think it was a little earlier than that, but only because I, got lucky and heard it through the grapevine.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about my dog.
Your dog and your cat are both trying to get on Jeopardy live panel tonight.
My husband just came in from the other room and said, "Talk louder." So I'm talking louder. Sorry. Which is also something Maggie said to me. So
she says that to everybody, I think, at some point.
Yes. Yeah. I think, yeah, even at the auditions, she'll tell people to talk louder.
Oh, yeah.
So, were there any stoppages in play last week, do you remember, from taping?
I guess during the game with Hannah, I just watched it recently, where they gave her comptroller.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, right.
That's the only one that I remember where they stopped and even corrected themselves at all that day.
That was the only correction I remember too. I mean, there was the usual. I've heard it's usual retaping of a few of the clues.
Oh yeah.
But I don't remember any other stoppages.
Okay. Yeah, that's. I mean, I was just. It's curious because sometimes.
Sorry to interrupt. I remember there was a stoppage right at the beginning of our taping. Alex came out and there was something wrong with his suit, and I don't remember what. There was a clip showing or something. So they started. They started the music. Johnny Gilbert did the intro. Alex came out, and then they were like, "Stop, stop, stop," and they had to redo it. My friend who was with me assured me that it was very good for me because my smile was terrible, apparently. So when they redid it, I was a little more relaxed.
Oh, so they for your game they had to you had a false start.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's how much of a blur it is. We both totally forgot about that. Yeah.
Were you surprised by half the categories when they came up when you were watching it live for the first time?
Oh, every time people are like, "What happened? What happened?" I was like, "Go watch and you'll find out." I will too. I don't remember.
Right.
Like, I remember it being over and shaking hands with Alex Trebek and thinking like, "I did not win Jeopardy today." Like that's all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't remember. I did better than I thought I did actually watching it back. So that's nice.
You did have the very nice run on the entertainment category that I think salvaged a lot of points for you.
Yeah, I'm hip with the teens, so.
Is that a result of being a librarian, as it were?
I am a teen librarian, and I'd love to ascribe my love of teenage things to my profession, but I was watching Pretty Little Liars and listening to NSYNC and all that way before I got my job, so I guess just young at heart.
Makes sense. So, both of you obviously made your debuts in the latter half of the week, so that means you both got to enjoy lunch on Sony's dime at the commissary. So,
Right.
in that case, I get to ask you both, what did you have for lunch?
Oh, geez.
I actually remember this, so I can answer if you don't mind. I was so nervous. I was about to throw up the whole day. So I had a tiny little plate of salad, and Maggie said, "Oh, look at you! Aren't you healthy?" And I said, "No, I just can't possibly eat more than this, or else I'll throw up."
I had a salad as well. I think that's why. Also, things are surprisingly cheap. I don't know if you remember that, Mark, but like they give you a certain amount to spend, and I got it to the cashier with my food, and she said it was like half of what I had, so I was like scrambling to grab Reese's cups at the end.
That's right. You brought a bunch of. Didn't you bring a bunch of candy for the table to share? Yeah, that's right.
But everybody was shy at first, but by the end it went over like gangbusters.
You know, it's interesting. I think sorry, you were going to say something.
Huh?
You sounded like you were going to say something.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, no, because I think that may very well be a bit of a geographical thing, actually, because I've had a lot of people from other parts of North America tell me that they felt that the commissary was particularly expensive. Now, is it inexpensive compared to...
I've been playing for close to 7 years now, so you can't shock me with the prices anymore.
So
it was not far above Chicago standards either. So
right.
So apparently the commissary prices are cheap for Los Angeles, but could be expensive compared to everywhere else.
Yes. Yeah.
So you both did reasonably well on your on Final Jeopardy, as it were, especially compared to Lane and his unfortunate miss that ended up sending him home. Can you talk through your respective thought processes on that Friday Final Jeopardy?
Sure. I don't know. It was Silicon Valley, so I was already thinking Apple. It was 1971 and 1977, so I was thinking Apple, and two founders, so I was thinking Apple. So I put down Apple. I did think of Hewlett Packard, but then I realized pretty quickly that the time frame was totally wrong for Hewlett Packard. And then I also remembered that Steve Wozniak worked there, so I knew it couldn't have been Hewlett Packard.
I do not know that much about Hewlett Packard, but I did kind of just think California, Apple, the timing was right. That's all it had to be. I was still surprised to learn that I was right, but that's what I was thinking.
How surprised were you, Mark, when you saw that Lane had put down Hewlett Packard?
I was very surprised. I figured he's a business owner. I figured since the category was about business, that was sort of his category. I I was shocked. I mean, first of all, I was shocked to win the game. I just couldn't believe it. Um, when we finished Double Jeopardy, I felt like, I've met my goal here. I didn't embarrass myself, and I'm not locked out of Final Jeopardy. So, I did well enough, and I felt pretty content with that. Although still nervous because I knew that there was, still game to be played. So I was just shocked by the fact that it happened. I mean, I wasn't totally shocked that he didn't get it because anybody can miss any question. You just don't know what people know. But I was a little surprised that I had just won.
Okay. Now, in yesterday's game, apparently you caught some flack in some spots of the internet for creating a new word, drillion.
It's a perfectly cromulent word.
Yes, it's a perfectly cromulent word. How many millions do you think might be in a drillion? I'm just curious. Here's a chance to coin the
Well,
word.
if it's 1 followed by 15 zeros, and a million is 1 followed by 6 zeros, right?
Yeah.
So I can't do the math. It's a lot of. It's a very large number, though.
But I thought that playing that one along at home, I was definitely. It took me a couple. I don't know if I would have gotten to the correct answer in the studio. It was, especially because drill came in the middle of the word, and it wasn't in quotation marks either. So it was really. It took some thinking to get there, and I certainly can't blame you for ringing in thinking you might be able to get it within the 5 seconds and then realizing you didn't have it and thinking, well, I've got to say something.
Right. It's exactly what happened. It was one of those ones where I rang in thinking like, okay, well, I can get this. I know it's got drill. I know it's a number. How hard can it be? It just wasn't coming. So had to say something.
Mm-hmm. How did you find the reaction online to your game on Friday, Megan?
People were mostly very kind. The people I know who were very sweet to me, they just said that they were proud of me for getting there, which was nice. But the reaction from strangers was just kind of like, wah, wah, poor Megan. Which is fine.
Okay. Which probably better than what some contestants have received over the years.
Oh God, yeah. No, I'd rather just be forgettable in that respect. If I'm not going to take it on, then just let's not talk about it, internet.
So I know you both said in your introductions that you haven't had the chance to watch much Jeopardy, or at least well, actually, sorry, Megan, you've watched a lot more than Mark has. I apologize, but so I'm not sure how well Mark might be able to answer this question. But how different is it watching Jeopardy now compared to before you taped in December?
Say it again.
How different is it watching Jeopardy, now in March, compared to before you taped back in December? Like, are there different things that you notice? Do you have, are your feelings different when you watch the game?
Oh yeah, I'm a lot more compassionate to the player for sure than I used to be. Not that I, would call people names, but I'm definitely more sensitive to the pressure that they're under and the hot lights and just all that. And just seeing how quickly everything switches around, yeah, it just gives you a bit of a different perspective. I think you expect less out of people and you're prouder of them for accomplishing what they did, even if they don't make it to Final Jeopardy. Some things are just hard,
Mm-hmm.
and I think more of them than I used to.
Nice. And how about you, Mark?
Yeah, I've definitely been watching it a lot more since I taped. Well, since I was invited for a taping, obviously I started watching it a lot to try to get ready. But now, it's like it's been great rediscovering this thing that I used to always like and haven't made time for in my life, and now making the time for it every day, or almost every day. Um, so I've been watching it a lot, and it's very different. Everything that Megan said, a lot more. I'm no longer yelling at the TV, "Come on, you idiots! It's whatever." How can you miss that? Because I know how they can miss it. There's a trillion ways they could miss it. I and I think it's been interesting, like just like the emotional reaction to it. Like when I first came back from the second taping, I really had a hard time watching for a little while because I was still kind of getting over sort of the feeling of like loss, and like, because it's the most exciting, amazing thing ever. I would kill to be able to play this game again. It is like such an exciting game to be up there playing it, and the realization you'll never be able to play it again is really rough. Um, but once I got over that, just like every time I hear the intro music, and I hear Johnny Gilbert, like I'm up there on the stage again. And I don't know if that'll last, but it's just like really exciting for me right now to hear that start up and kind of like relive those memories.
Very
To echo
nice.
what Mark, I felt the same way about. It was really hard. I'd forgotten about that. It was really, really hard to watch um, right after I taped because, especially watching people, like I said earlier, whose games were a little more suited to my tastes. It was like, why couldn't I have gotten that one, or why couldn't I have gotten? Yeah, it was hard to watch for a while, but now I'm back to loving it.
And I will say I've heard stories of, there are contestants who are still, have that sad or, slightly, bitter feeling towards Final Jeopardy, even 2 years after they've lost. So it's something that can happen with, you know, it takes some people longer than others to, regain their love for Jeopardy, as it were. So, obviously, I mean, the show has just finished its round of adult online testing. The teens are testing on Thursday. By the way, if you're eligible for the teen tournament and you want to be on Jeopardy, go to jeopardy.com. Make sure you sign up for that. Um, the online testing for that is coming up on Thursday. I believe the teen auditions are happening over the summer, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But adult auditions are taking, are going to be happening. I believe they're going to be in DC in a couple of weeks. So, do you happen to have any advice for people who might be going into auditions in the next couple of weeks?
I'll go. I say my advice is to know that you're not the smartest person in the room. Everybody in the room is smart about something different, maybe something that you're smart about or something that you're not smart about. So I would say the best strategy is um, they want likable, personable people. They want people who are going to go on and be good television. So be happy, be bright, and be nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I would definitely echo that. It's a screen test, more than anything else. I get the impression that the test they administer there is just to make sure you weren't cheating on the online test.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, I would just say, uh, for me at least, when I went to do my audition, it was like one of the most fun things I had ever done in my life, and I had no thought of ever actually really making it to Jeopardy. That was like incredible to me when I got the call. Um, so I just had a lot of fun with the audition, and it was just incredibly fun. The contestants were all, really cool to get to know, and the contestant coordinators were super fun and exciting, and the experience of like playing a mock game was really exciting and
Mm-hmm.
fun, and it was so cool. So just enjoy
Right.
it,
Mm-hmm.
relax and enjoy it.
Yeah.
And also, I would say, I hear people saying things like, "Oh, I have an audition, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity," but that's not true. You can just keep auditioning. Don't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
And told me they'd been there a handful of times.
Yeah.
So just keep taking it, keep going. They'll get to you eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just saw somebody who had auditioned, I think 4 times, get called up. So it's definitely, don't stress.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I wish I had I've had 3 myself. I still wish I had a better sense of what would, on a personal level, what would, make a good, what would get me through the audition. That being said, I've gotten really good at noticing it in other people and other people's auditions. And I just want to quasi brag that I like in my most recent audition, the person who was right beside me in my mock game, as I was auditioning, as I'm doing what I think I'm doing well, the person right beside me is like, I'm thinking, wow, you are absolutely killing this audition. And lo and behold, she got the call this week. So,
Hey,
Oh.
yeah, right.
so good. So she'll be so that person will be taping, and I guess you'll be seeing her on the show in the next few months anyway. So, but yeah, that's just something I wanted to say that it. I personally wish I could figure it out a little bit more for myself, but I can definitely notice it in others. It's like which Supreme Court justice was it? Was like when he's talking about pornography, it's like I don't know, or sorry, obscenity. It was like I know it when I know it when I see it, sort of thing.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a guy like that in my audition, and I unfortunately I don't follow the game well enough to know if he got called up, but he was doing his personality piece, and I was like, this guy is gonna be taping like in a week because he's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But also if you don't feel like a big time extrovert or great conversationalist or whatever, don't sweat that either, because lots of different types of people make it on the show.
So, Megan,
Yes.
you have someone in the live chat saying that they can't believe you haven't mentioned that your husband was on Jeopardy.
Oh yeah, yep. He was on Jeopardy back in 2014. He won one day, so we're very proud of that. So I've now sat through the studio audience twice.
How much did his experience help you?
Quite a bit, but not gameplay really. Just because I mean, so much of it is the feel of the button and the categories and like how comfortable you are, and nothing can really prepare you for actually standing up there. But as far as like logistics, you know, how to get there, which door to get into, those are not my strong suits either. So he really helped um, just get me organized and prepare me for how to stay composed. And I think his biggest contribution, aside from that, was like betting strategy, like how to know what you don't know and not go for it if you don't take a wild guess if you don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, that's certainly interesting. And also thanks to Matt Carberry, who has pointed out that the Supreme Court justice in question was Potter Stewart, and the I know it when I see it. And yes, the threshold test, his threshold test for obscenity in Jacob Ellis v. Ohio. So that's
Wow.
File that one away.
Well, file that one away. You never know. Hey, I mean, basically, Matt just was like, "It's Potter Stewart," and I just went to Google to figure it out. But I'm sure it'll come up somewhat at some point in some sort of trivia context for sure, because it's the Supreme Court justice who says that, so it's probably fair game. So, do either of you have any questions for each other or myself as I am through my my own, or anything you thought I'd bring up tonight but didn't?
Hmm.
I don't know. I was frankly expecting some more uncomfortable questions about my performance yesterday.
Well, it's to be brutally honest, I don't particularly want to bring people on here just to, start, throwing up a whole bunch of uncomfortable things, because, you're doing me a favor by coming on the podcast.
Sure.
And so I don't want to be like, yeah, you've done me this favor, now I'm just going to throw these terrible things at you. No, I don't operate that way.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I have a question for Megan.
Oh, let's hear it.
All right. Would you consider trying out for another different game show? Or is Jeopardy the one?
I mean, Jeopardy's the pinnacle, in my opinion. So, like, that's the one I'm the most excited about. But I actually have tried out for another game show and didn't get it. On the Game Show Network, that one called Idiot Test.
I don't know that one.
Okay, well, I mean, it's just a silly. It's kind of like it's an entire game show is created around stupid answers.
Mm-hmm.
The category. But I didn't get that. I mean, maybe Wheel of Fortune. I don't know. My experience was wonderful. I did not like being under the bright lights and the hot pressure. So probably not. What about you?
No, I don't know. I've been thinking about it. I haven't figured it out. I thought that I saw that Millionaire is still going, but that format is like absolutely brutal. So I don't know. I don't know if I'd really want to do it.
I think it's watching Keith Williams go through his Millionaire stack. There were so many. It seems like it really helps those who can, think laterally and think, be able to come up with really good reasons to discount answers, as it were. So I think that, that it's definitely for some people and not for others. But watching Keith Williams play Millionaire recently really, at least in my eyes, really, you're right. It takes a special person, though, in order to really do good, to really do well at Millionaire. So that's something I found interesting. Any other questions at this point?
None for me.
I don't have any questions. I do want to say that like the contestants on Jeopardy are so cool, and it was such a bummer that not everybody could win. I really it was painful every time watching people be eliminated.
It really was, and then watching it back was hard too, because I know these people. We spent we had lunch together. We talked about our lives and where we're from, and it was kind of a bummer to see them go. But on the upside of that, one of my experiences, and hopefully other people have the same, is when I did lose, I was just so excited that Mark won that I didn't want to lose, but still, just like someone won money. So good. It's not like you're standing up there with strangers. It's a little easier to lose when you've spent some time with someone.
That's a really good point. That's very true.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that note, I think that's a pretty good time to say thank you to the both of you for joining me on #Jeopardy Live panel this evening. It was great talking with you both about your experiences.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. This was fun.
This was really fun.
So, we'll be back to our normal Monday nights next week. Unfortunately, we normally tape on Mondays, but I was taping a bonus episode of the Trivial Warfare podcast last night. You'll be seeing that hopefully before opening day. Poor Jonathan has a significant amount of editing to do, as the taping took almost 5 hours to get through last night. So there's a lot of audio for him to edit. Hopefully he comes out before opening day. It is all about baseball, and I believe I'm not sure if it's a general bonus episode or a bonus episode for those solely in the Trivial Warfare Army. I'm not sure yet. But if you're into that podcast, you'll get a chance to hear that in the coming weeks. But we'll be back to Monday nights for sure, next Monday at 9:15 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so much for joining us on #Jeopardy Live panel this evening. We'll see you next week, and have a great night.